In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate the Blueprint Designer and give you an overview of how it works, and then we can go into more detail about tips and tricks on how to get the most out of it and make things easier for you in subsequent videos. So to access the Blueprint Designer, I'm going to click Blueprint Designer in the menu on the left. And right now it's loading and sorting all of the materials from the Prodigy library into this list. Now, if you've seen this screen, you may think, well, that looks like the remediation designer. This is the same thing as the remediation plan designer. The difference is when we're not doing remediation and we just go into the blueprint designer, we don't just have access to the recommended study resources for an individual student. We have access to all of the study materials inside Prodigy. And right now they're organized according to general categories like airway management, anatomy, monitoring, musculoskeletal, and so on. On the other side of the screen, we have what looks to be a weekly calendar. And this actually helps us design a lesson plan for a single student or for a group of students that can range anywhere from 4 to 16 weeks. So let's say that we wanted to create a lesson plan that was 2 months long. I would choose the duration. Instead of 16 weeks, I'm going to choose 8 weeks. And now you can see that we have a panel for each week. If you look closely, you can see that week 1 starts on December 8th, week 2 starts on December 15th, week 3 on the 22nd, and so on. But let's say that we decide that we want our lesson plan to start on January 1st. I'm going to click the start date, move it to January 1st, and now all of the dates in this weekly plan have updated accordingly. We'll get to maximum questions per week and a blueprint name in just a minute because I'd like to demonstrate a few other things first. We can pick which individual study items we would like for that student to study in week 1. So for example, I'm going to click the arrow here to open up the airway management folder. And let's say that in week 1, I would definitely like the students to study airway axis alignment. So I'm going to double click that item and it'll appear in week 1. I could choose airway exchange catheter. That will appear also in week 1. And I could, if I wanted to, go to the anatomy folder, find a particular item here, double click it and add it. But let's say, for example, that I added spine landmarks to week 1 accidentally and I didn't want it there. I could just double click it and remove it. If we wanted to take a look at what this study item looked like let's say bag mask ventilation, I could click it and then come down here to the bottom and click Preview Resource, and it'll show me the article or the video or whatever the study resource is right here, so I can decide if I'd like that to appear in that week's study materials. Once I've added all of the study materials that I'd like to have in week 1, the system already knows to go back and scan all of the topics that I've added and select questions from the Prodigy database that come directly from that study material. So what that means is at the end of each week, it will automatically generate an exam and test the student on that study material alone. If I pulled airway exchange catheter out and it's not in there anymore, then it's not going to choose questions based on airway exchange catheter. Let's say I'm going to double click a few more here for week 1. We'll put difficult airway algorithms and difficult airway extubation and maybe pre-oxygenation just to add a 5th topic. When I'm ready, I can go on to week 2, and I do that by clicking the header here of that list box, and you'll see that there's a green outline around the active week. That's the week that I'm adding to. Also, if I go back to week 1 by clicking it, now it's highlighted, and I'm looking at these topics. When it creates the exam, when it pulls questions from these topics, it's going to pull a maximum of whatever number I put here. Right now it defaults to 100 questions per week's exam. So if I up this to 150, then when it checks these topics for week 1, it will pull a maximum of 150 questions for that week's exam. Here I only have 5 topics. There may not be 150 questions covering just those 5 topics. There might be 25. In that case, that week's quiz will only have 25 questions. So let's leave this back at 100, and I'm going to click week 2. Now let's say that I wanted to add, let's do endocrine for this week. I've clicked the endocrine folder, and you notice when the endocrine folder is active or selected, it has a blue line around the word endocrine. That means that it's active. So imagine I wanted to add all of these items to week 2, and I didn't want to go through and double click each one and tediously add them to that week. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the A key on the keyboard, A for all, and that's going to add all of the topics in that highlighted folder to that week. So it just added all 48 topics to that week. Likewise, on week 2, it'll be 100 questions. That's the maximum that it'll have on each week's exam. This one, however, has more topics to pick from, so it probably will max out at 100 questions. Let's say that I spotted one item I didn't like. Let's say it's hypothalamus. I can double click that, and I've removed it from that list. Maybe, for example, I'd like hypothalamus to be in week 3. I can simply double click it from the list, and it'll add it to week 3, which is right now the active list. So what we do is we go through each of these folders, pick the topics that we want, add them to each week, and we're going to save this blueprint. So the final thing is to give it a blueprint name. I always recommend naming the blueprint for the course it's associated with first. And that way, when you go to assign the blueprint, as we'll demonstrate in another video, when it appears in alphabetical order, all of the blueprints that are associated with a particular course will be grouped together, and all of the blueprints will be in alphabetical order. So let's say we called this 2-month review. Then we can, once we've completed the blueprint and added all the topics that we want, we can save the blueprint and assign it to students. And then once they load that blueprint on their system, they can begin taking the weekly exams, and you can track their progress remotely. If you look under the words Blueprint Designer here, there's a little link that says Sort Alphabetically. Right now, we're sorted by general topic. So let's say I wanted to sort them alphabetically. I'm going to click that link. I'm going to wait a little bit, and it reorganizes everything. So now it has all of the articles in alphabetical order. So let's say I was looking for Boyle's Law. Well, there it is in alphabetical order. I can double click it, and now I've added it to week 3, which is the active week. And I can go back to sort for easy distribution. This is all articles by category, and this groups them. Say airway management is together. You'll see those are together. Then it may go to anatomy, to equipment, that sort of thing. So it's grouped them alphabetically. If I want to, I can click it again, and it will group all the materials in Prodigy by NBCRNA heading. So if we wanted to look at just basic sciences, it's now grouped all of the basic sciences topics together. And I could go to week 4 and work on, say, acromegaly, add those topics. Now, if you notice, when I tried to add acromegaly to week 4, I had added all the endocrine topics earlier to week 2, and it just gave me an update. I'll click it again to show you. It will not allow me to duplicate a topic in multiple weeks. So it says acromegaly already appears in week 2. And also, if I clicked week 3 and I wanted to add an entire folder, and that folder contained hypothalamus and Boyle's Law, it would add everything but hypothalamus and Boyle's Law so that it doesn't duplicate the articles in a single week or within the entire study plan. If I want to, I can click Sort by Category, and that'll take us back to where we started with the grouping by general categories. In the next video, I'll show you how we save these and how we assign them to a student, and then we'll look at what that looks like, what a blueprint looks like from a student's perspective.